Hi guys, welcome to another part of Project KH, basically based on the engine. After our last video, I want to do a little bit of research on the preload tension on the kickstart return spring, and just a little bit of just basically check it over. I mean, nobody knows everything. It was just to see if there's any hidden sort of agendas with splitting the cases on this engine. So while my camera battery's been charging up as well, I've slackened the nuts off and basically just given her a little bit of a tap with a ruler and we've cracked it all off. So she's literally ready to remove. And there we go. Wow, there's some sediment in there. Certainly is. Anyway, all sorts of different thoughts going through my head. I'm just going to put that down for a minute. That's ultimately going up for vapor blasting. Right. You know, you drain the oil out, like I say, you never get it all. It always has that little puddle ready for you. So, right, okay. Like I say, it's easy to change a bit of cardboard on it. So let's have a look what we've got. Now, I'm trying to get that so you can. That actually looks a little bit much to me. So a little bit of side to side, excessive side to side against the thrust washers in the crank. I don't know, we can feel gauge this up and measure it all anyway, but so let me get this out now. The old crank seals. Now, after a while they go a bit, might sound daft, but too soft. And I don't know if you can see that the actual lip edge seems to have gone on that seal. Be interesting to see what a new one's like, but I think that's ready. Personally, for changing. Anyway, put that over here. Now, when I lift the crank out in a minute, we can have a listen. We can have a listen to everything. Let's look at the gearbox to start with. So, here we are now. We can actually see down there. So, see the selector forks. So there's two on that shaft, and just looks like there's one on that shaft. Again, output shaft seal here, so it'll come when we lift the shaft and get the shaft out. Here we go. A little bit of. I'll try to take that one first. So we've got a little clutch push rod seal on the end of here. So in there, now the whole lot, I'm just going to lift out as one. Notice the little peg locates in a hole in the bearing, which is there. Many times you can get a situation where, well, I'm not saying you've got to make sure that locates before you bolt them cases down, because if that hole isn't lined up with that peg and you come to tighten the cases down, you crack the cases. So just food for thought. Now on this bearing, the groove in it has this little ring. Generally they just push out. little location. That stops the end float of the bearing being able to, it locates the bearing. It's clamped down in the cases, but it can't move side to side by the ring. I'm actually going to put that in the tub with the nuts and bolts for now. Now, we did talk about the kickstart, this bolt at the back that I tried to just kind of crack with my hand. The way I read this, and I've obviously looked into it, is the cases go together and then you preload up the spring until this cam, quadrant of this cam comes round it, until that rotates round, put a bit of tension on, put the bolt back in, and then that tensions that spring back up. So essentially we don't want to do anything more with that. We're just going to, again, there's the pin, so again we're just going to take that out and put that in with our bits and pieces. Right, okay, so now we can see a selector fork over here. Now, generally on selector forks, if you've got razor sharp edges, the fork can be worn. Now, I'm sorry to say, but I think that selector fork's quite worn, but let's have a look. We'll get it out and we'll have a look. Okay, so she's come out. So I'm just going to lift her out. Okay, and just put it there, keeping end to end. The shaft just comes out as it is. Yes, it's got an oil seal on the end of it. Now, the selector forks on the box, and you can see, oh, I hate all this oil stuff everywhere, but right, put that to one side for a minute. Now, you can see with these selector forks, they have the dog, if you like, that follows the scroll in the selector drum. So as the selector drum's moving around, they slide along following the shape of the scroll. Okay, now keeping those two out of the way for the minute, that plate is holding them in place. This one is a bit more of a concern to me. They don't look, you know, you can kind of run your fingers up and down that.
Is there any cups that need washing? I don't want to know. Sorry to disturb.
There we are. There we go. I think my cup of tea's getting refilled again. Right, okay, where were we? This one I don't like the look of, but anyway, we'll come back to that selector forks in a minute, because I always like to take them out exactly in my hand and put them immediately back on the shaft. So you kind of, because they are different, you know, the handed and the different. Okay, so I'm going to move to the crank now. We've got a crank seal in the middle that separates. We've got two main bearings there and a seal to seal this cylinder from this cylinder, and one there to seal that cylinder from that cylinder. And we've also got main bearings either side of each crank web. I mean, you can see when I say no, an engine that's been sat, generally these webs rust, you know, so when they kind of run out of lubricant. But what I'm going to do for the minute, in fact 2 minutes, what I'm going to do is put a gearbox on a different bench. Okay, so you can't see that just at the minute, but I need the room here, so all I'm essentially going to do is just move that shaft and take that like that. Okay, careful not to drop that bearing off that end. Just take that like that and put it in a clean box. Okay, complete gearbox. We need to obviously examine the dogs on the back of the gears, etc. But for the minute I just need the room here where the camera is. So just moving that over there, I'm going to now get the crank along with our rags and lay our crank down. Okay, right, Now, they kind of feel excessive to me, but I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm going to measure it, and we're going to not assume anything. Just looking at where the seals sit for rust. Now, to stop crank end flow, what they've done, Kawasaki, they've got a groove in this bearing. A groove in that bearing. There's also one of those little rings there, which stops. I don't want to come out that, so if I don't want to come out, we ain't going to lose it for the minute. Now, as you can see, what I was saying earlier about, there's been water in that crankcase. Look at the different, I mean, look in there, that's just pitting and corrosion. So for that level of corrosion, for me personally, the corresponding crankshaft web, this one, would have been horrific. Now it shows signs of perhaps a little bit of, but for me that crank would have been horrific. So I think this has had a crank in it at some time. I think personally it's had a crank. I mean, look at the difference. The difference in them three. Hey, fantastic. So I'm going to come back to that. I'm just going to lay that there over the tools and we'll just have a look at this crank. Can't wait till we get to a point where we can, all the oily, dirty stuff, we can get it in the bin, and then we're working with nice, clean stuff. But anyway, let's have a look and we'll listen. To be fair, yeah, no, doesn't sound bad, but get that at the right angle to the camera. Now, a bit of movement in that bearing, but trying to get the seal away from it so we can spin it and have a listen to it. Again, back on the crank seal there, these are old. These are so old. The lip's gone. The actual lip inside there is flat. I don't know if you can see that. It's so slack and soft as well. Just so. I know they need to be soft and supple, but there's a degree of, I mean, that would, for me, that would move around with a crankcase pulsating, pressure pulsations, but no, I mean, even, forgetting all that, putting all that aside, that lip inside there is worn away. So we want a couple of crank seals, which I'll get the measurements off and part number off shortly, but okay, now where do we draw the line with, you know, an old engine, and what can be reused and what's it actually going to do? It's not like he's going to be going down to, you know, Cornwall and what have you every day on it, is it? You know, I mean, where do you draw the line on something that could potentially be very difficult to find? I mean, these rods, personally, that looks a bit excessive, like I say, but now just have a look at centre one. With the TZs, again, back to the TZs, when we used to run these thrust washers, you can see inside, they used to blue. They used to actually get blue. I mean, I don't know what the spec is, but I mean, they look lubed enough. And You can never tell the condition of a big end in a two-stroke if A, you can't feel it, but until you split the crank, I mean, it's a completely press the crank apart, 120-degree crank, you know, that wants to be, they seem an awful lot of movement in them, but I think that's the, is that the C grade as they call it? That clearance? You know? Anyway, for me, the bit I want to be looking at, I want to be feeler gauging down the side of the rod there. And look, let's see if it's in spec, just outside spec, a long way outside spec, or I mean, what you generally can get with a two-stroke as well, you get the rod bluing on the bottom, is another sign of, you know, excessive wear and running hot. I mean, again, that they don't really look like this. I don't think it's an overly worked engine, to be fair, though, either. I mean, looking at that one again. And another telltale is when it's at bottom dead centre, can the rod touch? Can the rod touch the crank webs? Not quite, but I tell you what, it's not far off. That one does. Hang on, is that? Oh no, sorry, it was on the cardboard. No, just not. So, you actually see the rods on some really worked two-strokes where it's been just kissed at the side of the rod here where it's touched the. So, anyway, an oily old crank there that we need to do some measuring. Slightly noisy, that one, and we could change that. With it being an outer, it's changing the inners. But they don't seem bad. A little bit of a rumble on that one. Anyway, so there we have the crank, first kind of impressions on the crank. Coming back to the gearbox selectors. This one here, ho ho, how hot has that been? Can you see that in there? Does that pick that up correctly? It's actually blued. It's been that hot. That means it's, for some reason, it's not been set up correctly, the gearbox, i.e. when this is in its scroll, it's been pressing too hard either one way or the other way on the corresponding slot on the shaft. So it's essentially too hard one way and it just cooks the selector. We definitely need a new selector in there. I mean, it's one half of that away. So it'd be interesting to get that out and have a look at that. So let's have a look at that. Yeah, so what we need here, we've got the detent there, the little spring-loaded detent that little spring-loaded detent there that follows these as it moves around. It'll go into another one, to another one. So there's first. Now it can't ride over the top of there, so it can't rotate any further that way. So then neutral, and second, third. I can spin it fourth, and then finally fifth. And it obviously then the big cam there, it can't. So there's fifth. Anyway, let's have a look how tight any of this is. Will it get it? Even though it's been centre popped, I think we possibly won't get that. Right, I'm probably going to cut the video off. In fact, I will cut the video off at this point. I need to find my impact driver because I have no idea where it is. So we don't want to leave that on the video. I don't know if again you can see that selector blued. You can actually see it being blued. And again, looks even worse that side. That signifies perhaps it's been pushing that way. Hope you can see that. We'll see it better when I get it out anyway. Like these ones. They just look happy as you like them. There's nothing wrong with them. You can run your fingers along. You won't want to run your fingers along that one, I'll tell you. Anyway, else you'll end up with a load of cuts over here. And like I've got on this one, which is why I've got the black glove on. In case any of you are wondering. Just stops all the crap getting in. So anyway, I'm going to sign off at that with this engine. Mop up some of this oil. Get it placed out where we need it to be, and the next one will assess the selector forks, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Okay, so again, thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Pulling apart a little two-stroke quacker, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay, thanks for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe. Cheers, guys.